Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Russ Jones.
And Brad Cannon here.
We are wide open.
How you doing tonight, Russ?
I am good. I feel like a champion.
Well,
Are you
good.
feeling champion-esque
I feel
tonight?
I feel champion-esque this evening. Yes.
Champion-esque?
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah. Sure.
Things going okay with you?
Sure.
It's a
Absolutely.
beautiful sunny day today. It's
It is
40 here in the valley.
same up here, and but we're expecting more bad weather tonight. So, yay!
Yeah, I was trying to get into this back place of this park where there's a history of Bigfoot sightings, and you look at it on a map and it doesn't do it justice when you have to cross a creek 4 times. And someone lives back up this hollow where you cross this creek 4 times. It's hard to imagine, the winter or, when it floods or hard rains, I guess you just don't get out for a while.
Yeah, and it's odd that we're so soft as people today that we just assume that we have a hard time because we have to shovel our driveway when we get a little bit of snow or we get a little bit of bad weather, and it's like, I don't really want to go out. Well, this guy, he's got to cross a creek 4 times.
Yeah. I mean, didn't you guys just have a snow day? The kids in Columbus had a snow day and there was
I
no
think
snow.
there was no snow.
Yeah. I mean, what's that
Literally
all about?
the day of the snow, it was cleared off by noon, and there was nothing going on. So,
So then they cancel school the next day.
yeah, it's teachers union. It's all big racket, man. They
Yeah.
get paid. They're looking for an
Jeez.
extra day off. So anyway,
Okay.
that's enough chit chat.
Okay. What are we doing? What are we talking about tonight?
I have no idea. You tell me.
So tell me, what's the tallest person you ever saw?
Shaquille O'Neal, probably.
Did you see him in person?
Yes, I did. I saw him at a Formula One race.
Oh, really?
Yes, I did.
How tall is he?
I think he's like 7'2", but he's just big. He's just a big human being. He's not just tall and skinny. He's just a big man. Greg Oden, I think Greg Oden was what, 7'1". I went to a lot of basketball games. He's a tall man. So
If you saw them in the woods, would you consider them to be giants?
not really. I wouldn't, because today there's I'm above average height. I'm 6'1", 6'2". We have friends that are 6'3", 6'4". They're only talking 6 to 8 inches taller than that person. They're a foot taller than me, or Greg Owens 11 inches taller than me. I wouldn't consider him being a giant. I would consider
Mhm.
him being a tall person. You got the tribes of what is the Maasai. The Maasai are very tall. Uh, a lot of tall basketball players come out of Africa, which are very, very tall. Manute Ball, his son, was super tall. So no, I wouldn't really consider them giants. I really wouldn't.
And what was it, just a century ago, the average American male was like 5 feet 6 inches tall or something like that.
Correct.
So to
So,
them.
well, look at the average height in North Korea based because of their diet and based on their diet, I think they're about 5'4" is the average height of a North Korean right now, a North Korean male.
You know,
So
um, I get, how I am, because I'll get into get into an interest in a subject and I get torn up with it. So about 2 or 3 months ago, I was really interested in giants.
right.
Like, were they Nephilic type things out of the Bible? Were they just something else or whatever it happened to be? And I read, 6 or 7 books in a period of a month, plus, all the online internet research, and got consumed with it. And I know you were pretty interested in that too.
I am, but the problem is you do a search for North American giants and you look at images, and it's literally a picture of an excavator, a large, you know, excavator, uh, uncovering a skull. Well, obviously that's not real. So what can we believe? What can't we believe? I even looked up. I found an article that was it was out of Australia. It was a person or a giant that was 17 foot 4 inches tall. And you read the article and you get down there and it's like, oh, by the way, this is fake, because the person that did the article doesn't even exist. So I'm very standoffish about what I believe, and I just haven't done the research. So but the guest that we're bringing on tonight, I think he's probably the guy we should be asking.
He's actually done research.
He's actually done research. So
unlike you and I, he may have an educated opinion.
Right. I my research was I drove by it and waved, and that was my research. So we're going to go a little bit further, and we're going to bring on Travis Roy right here.
Hey, Travis.
Howdy, guys.
Welcome, my friend. Good to have you this evening. Travis is in Texas.
So do you have an official organization or just your Instagram? What qualifies you, or where can these people find this information we're going to talk about this evening?
Well, right now I'm strictly on Instagram and on Facebook under the name Giants_of_Ancient America, all one word.
Okay.
That's where I post all the research that I do.
Okay.
Do you concentrate your research mainly in North America, or do you do kind of everywhere?
I'll do everywhere. I feel like most of my research does bring up reports from America, and I'm not sure, probably because most of the time it is they are American newspapers that are reporting this stuff. Sometimes they're Australian and other newspapers, but most of the time it's coming from the U.S. But the U.S. Newspapers will report on finds in, say, the British Isles or France, in Mexico or in South America. So, but yeah, mostly in the U.S. is what's bringing it to the top whenever I do research.
Okay, so what was your Instagram? Giants of Ancient America?
You're right. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so I'm going to pop this on right here. This is not of Ancient America, but it's something that's been going around. I've heard the stories, and that's one of the first things I want to ask you about. This is the Giant of Kandahar. If people don't know what we're talking about, I think it was during the Afghan War, which we just got out of. So it's fairly recent history. Supposedly I think that the story goes that they were actually watching these giants come down into a village at night, and they sent special forces up. This giant red-haired thing came out, impaled one of the special forces. They shot this thing in the head, killed it. It had, multiple rows of teeth, 6 fingers, blah, 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 whatever it is. And supposedly several people had actually, seen. What's your take on this? Because this is a modern giant that is somewhere today. And, there's videos out there and there's some other stuff out there. What's your take?
Well, I heard that story years ago whenever when it's coming out. And I try to keep an open mind when I hear stories like that. And I don't see why it could not be true.
Is the ones that we're seeing with the we were just talking about them before we came on about there's a lot of videos where they show the night vision giants are walking around the soldiers, tanks and stuff, and this is modern day present stuff. Is that the same thing? I'm asking you guys because I don't know. Is this the same type of animal or creature or whatever it happens to be that they're seeing now?
Yes, I believe so. I think it's the same as what this Kandahar giant was. Of course, a lot of this night vision, they're not able to see the color of the hair, but they do say that it seemed to have hair on its head and it did not seem to have hair on its body. I don't know how you could tell that, but that's what the reports were.
And something else that strikes me is I know that I think read some articles or maybe heard you on another podcast or something, and red hair seems to be a common theme. I know that here in North America, maybe I think there was a fair-haired tribe of them somewhere, but it seems like the red hair, that Celtic, Scottish background, whatever that is, seems to be a common theme. So that tends to give me a little more credence, except the 2 rows of teeth does not. But I did find an article that was written in the 1800s, I do believe, that talked about a giant that had 2 rows of teeth in it. So, there are similarities.
Right. Yeah, I've come across that as well in my research of the double rows of teeth.
Right.
I've heard a lot of other people talk about it like it was like all the time. Honestly, I don't come across it that often, but I have come across it.
Okay.
So it is a thing.
So it's like a genetic anomaly that is, we don't know, of course, is it some type of pituitary disorder, that we see, the acromegaly or whatever that we see with different Andre the Giant, the big wrestler, and some people like that, so whatever had this type of genetic disorder also was common for them to have 6 fingers or 2 rows of teeth, apparently.
Yeah, I've come across in a report where there was about 68 giants unearthed, and some of those giants had like horns coming from their skull.
Oh yeah, I don't want that either. I don't want to do that. Like,
Yeah, so
that's
it's like,
kind of like the whole dog man pig snout things.
Yeah,
I don't
so-
want to have. I don't want to have. I don't want to see anything with horns sticking up either. I don't like that. That's
Yeah.
so much.
yeah, I don't know what to think about it. And for years, I wouldn't like report on it at all. So like, I don't know what's up about that. But my point is like the double rows of teeth. It's something that's not supposed to be.
Mhm.
The 6 fingers is not supposed to be. That kind of lends to the fact that these humans aren't normal humans. They come from a different bloodline that wasn't supposed to happen, and it caused problems. I kind of see the double rows of teeth as a problem. But yeah, going back to the red hair, you do have a point there that, yeah, there were red hair giants in America. And I would assume that there were red hair giants in the British Isles as well, kind of where the Celts were.
Mhm.
Because you can kind of see it. If you're seeing it in Afghanistan now, possibly. I mean, I kind of buy into that story, but I mean, who's to say? I wasn't there, but I do tend to believe the other additional reports, don't even focus on the Kandahar giant, but the other ones saying like, I saw it in my night vision and it stood up and it wasn't a group of men. It was one man and it seemed to be about 15 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
So it was taller than the tree that it was squatting beside. So
Is there cover for that type of human? I don't know what we're going to call that, but that creature. I mean, do they have enough cover over there to hide something like that? I always picture it kind of like this, open arid desert with pockets of caves and, maybe jungle type, brushy choked hollows.
yeah, honestly, I don't know what Afghanistan is like. I picture it being like really rocky and kind of
Yeah.
deserty, but who knows? There may be some trees. I mean, obviously there were, because the guy reported it. There were some trees that it was
Right.
squatting next to.
Right.
So
Okay.
yeah, interesting.
All right. So we're going to agree that there's something there. So let's look at the past. Let's look
Wait
at
a
the
second, Brad. Let me ask you one
Go
question.
ahead.
You mentioned the 6 finger thing. Is that you talked about that, Brad?
Yeah, was
Okay.
in the report.
Well, I remember when I was doing some research when we were getting ready for it, when you said 6 fingers, it reminded me that they had said that the Indian tribes, that's why it was common for them from a distance to hold their hand out, everybody, like we would always say how, that type of thing when we were growing up. But that was so supposedly they could identify whether or not there was 6 fingers on a hand. Had you heard that anywhere before?
I've heard of it, but
I never have.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't read the report of the Indian legend, but I've heard of that story.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It's a little
So-
freaky, huh?
All right.
Yeah.
So we agree that there was something over there. Now, if there was something over there, then there's got to be something here in the United States over history, over time. In fact, I live 40 minutes north of the Serpent Mound in Chillicothe. I had family down there, so I would literally pass it twice every Sunday. We would drive right past and wave to the serpent. I know that I had heard a guy talk that worked there, said that for years there was a 11 or 12 foot, whatever, giant skeleton in a glass case in the building for the Serpent Mound. One day somebody came in from the federal government, took that body, never saw it again. It was gone, and it had been there for years and years and years.
That was somebody in your family that had seen that, Brad?
No, I actually heard a gentleman talking about it down there.
Okay.
So here's something that really, really bothers me, because you have how many articles? Probably, you post every other day articles, hundreds and hundreds of articles. This is a part of the history of the world, United States, and we have buried it. The government has buried it. Have they buried it? Are these things real, or are these things just pituitary gland gone wrong? Or are they tribes of humans? Because I've heard people talk about, Ohio, there's a lot of mounds in Ohio, and they're trying to define that, hey, back using technology back then, a guy with a wheelbarrow and a shovel, which a wheelbarrow didn't even exist. They've never found one. It would take them, 1,000 years or whatever it was to build this mound, where if it was a giant and they could move mass volumes easier, it would take whatever. So let's go ahead and get into that.
Yeah. No, I actually believe that this isn't a something where they have a pituitary gland problem. I believe it's a real group of people, because some of these reports that I come up with, they're like the bones were very thick, or the teeth were like horse's teeth, or the skull was 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick.
Wow.
Or at the shoulders, he was 4 feet wide. It was 8 feet tall and 4 feet wide.
Right.
This is very common in these reports that I come up with, or I don't come up with them, that I research. I don't want it to sound funny, like I'm making this stuff up. I'm getting this from I'm searching a website where you can go and look up newspapers from the Library of Congress. So it's just public domain. You can go search it yourself, throw in the search word. It's pulling up a real newspaper, but you have to dig around and find what you're looking for. A lot of times you don't find what you're looking for. You might be talking about a giant, sloth or something, or,
sure,
what I'm saying. But yeah, so I do believe that this is a real thing, and that, maybe they are covering it up.
Why are there so many in the Ohio Valley? Why is that such a popular area historically for these things?
That's a good question. It does seem that there were a lot more larger mounds there than other places of the U.S. There's some massive mounds up there. And I have found a whole lot of reports from there. And so I don't know if I'm not really familiar with the area, because I haven't traveled up there that often, but I believe there's some riverways that go up that way.
Yeah.
I guess you'd have to go upstream, but maybe they were traveling the riverways, because back then there weren't highways, of course.
Sure.
Right.
So I think they were navigating upstream.
That makes sense.
So what is, you've done this a lot, and have you run across an article, an item, something that just kind of was that aha moment of, man, this really is an amazing article. It points to the truth, and this is something that, is real.
I would have to say, there's the ones that kind of give names of people.
Okay.
Or a lot of times they'll throw out a name of a farmer or something like that.
Okay.
And if you were to go research that and find out that these guys actually existed, here's one here. That's a good question.
Okay.
I come from the background of just believing it already. So sure. I come at it okay, all these reports has to put some, truth to it, but I get what you're coming from. But here's one from Mexico. Skeletons of giants are found. This is from the Evening Star, Washington, D.C., 1925. Several ancient giant skeletons ranging from 10 foot to 12 foot tall found in a cave. Their feet average 18 inches to 20 inches in length. One of the most interesting recent discoveries in Mexico is that, reported by prospecting miners operating a new gold and silver mining district in the state of Chihuahua, according to one of the engineers who has reached Mexico City from the Sierra Madre range of mountains where the operations are being carried on, there have been discovered several human skeletons measuring from 10 to 12 feet in length. They were all found in one cave, being quite intact. The average length of the feet was from 18 to 20 inches. So the anthropological department of Mexican government is planning to send a commission to investigate the discoveries. The investigation is expected to clear up the origin of the wonderful Indians of the state of Chihuahua. The skeletons are all found in a sitting posture, shoulders being upward and arms resting on upraised knees.
So
this is just an example of articles that I discovered.
So that was as recent as 1925, which, you know, that's not even 100 years ago. Because obviously, you know, there's a lot of excavation going on, but, you know, we're not excavating mounds. And if, you know, there's Indian mounds and places like that around, you know, they're protected. We don't go into them. You know, if a guy's digging up his farm and finds a giant skeleton and he calls the local university, what happens? You know, does the government step in and take that discovery?
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I think it was about the 40s, wasn't it, that we started losing a lot of these giant reports at that point. I mean, I don't know if that means that a lot of the land had been, you know, excavated, or, you know, the caves had kind of been gone through so that we were finding a lot of the stuff. But I noticed when I was doing research that it was around the 40s that we start hearing so much. Is that what you've noticed as well?
Yeah, I've noticed that, and I've come across a few articles talking about the Smithsonian. My first article I came across was in 1891 from the Pittsburgh Dispatch, and it's kind of back and forth, so I won't read the whole thing, but
sure.
The gist of it was the Smithsonian Institute of Washington, D.C. argues for the right to excavate and display prehistoric skeletons. So they were into this in the mid to late 1800s. I have another report from this is from 1895. This is long story short. It's a museum. It's a dime museum that was going out of business, being shut down, and they had some things there. And one of the things that they had was a 9-foot mummy of an Indian.
Okay.
And the Smithsonian saw the article or the advertisement from the museum selling off their stuff. So they sent 3 different men from the Smithsonian there, and it has their names here too. I have yet to look them up to see if they're legit, but we could, and you know, we might find out that they are. So it names them, and it says after a long and careful examination, they pronounced the mummy to be real, and the giant they said would. Let's see. Hold on. Sorry, I got the wrong page here.
Okay.
All the experts who have examined the giant mummy, which is nearly 9 feet in height, think it is a curiosity fit to be placed at the National Museum. And that's from the Atlanta Constitution in 1895.
So essentially, you know, because I remember that there was actually some of the people in charge of the Smithsonian and some of the government institutions actually were not scientists. Some of them were even ministers. That the basics of it is that the government was taking some of the things because they were concerned that these giants might in some way harm people's belief in creationism. And so a lot of people believe that the Smithsonian destroyed a lot of the giants or the bones. I mean, there's a lot of historical pictures. You'll see like a whole town standing in front of the skeleton, but then the skeleton went to Smithsonian. Supposedly it doesn't exist anymore, but you have this picture with the whole town in front of it. Is that your belief of why we just can't find these in the government, or is it because our government is unorganized and horrible at everything that they do?
I mean, come on, it's the Smithsonian Institute. They gotta keep track of what they have. But you know,
oh my gosh,
we've heard the stories. You know, that they've been, supposedly been sued, or Travis can talk about this.
I mean, they have
But
like warehouses the size of it's like
it's not
millions
Indiana
and millions
Jones.
of square feet
It's
that
not
they don't
Indiana
even know what
Jones.
they even have.
Did they destroy these on purpose to put it to rest? Because I believe the opposite. I believe that if this is Nephilim, a fallen angel, they're giants, they're in the Bible. This gives credence to the Bible. It throws away evolutionary theory. And that's what scientists don't like. Scientists don't like to bring God into anything.
Okay, so let's back up just for the people that don't know exactly what we're talking about. In biblical terms, Satan fell from heaven with a third of the angels. They liked the way that the women on earth looked. They bred with them. The offspring that they had were Nephilim. And so they were corrupting the DNA, the original DNA that God had made. And so that's what Nephilim are. And so they were always large, like Goliath. David and Goliath in the Bible. Goliath was around 10 feet tall. And, he had two brothers where they're about that tall. And, there's a lot of other tall people in the Bible that are Nephilic in nature. But
Right.
So Brad, you're saying you believe that these giants are related to Nephilim.
Sure.
Travis, do you believe that, or you don't believe that?
No, I do believe that. Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I believe that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do kind of tend to lean towards the idea that maybe because it does prove the Bible and God's word that may be why that they're trying to, shove it behind them per se. And now I don't know if they really would have destroyed all of them. You know what I mean? Like if they had that in a box somewhere, like would they do testing with it? I don't know. Like why would you throw it all away? I don't know. I don't know where I stand with that, but I do know that I came across another article while we're on the subject, and this was in 1934. So you mentioned like the 40s, the mid 30s,
Yes.
it kind of stopped. Well, I found an article. This is from the Waterbury Democrat, March 16th, 1934. The Smithsonian institution is fed up, quote unquote, and it actually says that, on skeletons of prehistoric human giants. And Dr. Alice Hrdlicka, curator of the anthropology, makes no bones about it. So around 1934, they were tired of hearing about people, because they didn't have control of people finding this stuff, right? It was like a road graders were finding it, or there was a water main leak on a ranch and it blew out the side of this hill or washed it out, and there was this giant, or they were building a railroad and they cut through this mound and here are these giants. And so the Smithsonian report, this report here says the Smithsonian was tired of it. So that may be an answer to the question.
So they got tired of it, recently, as in the last 10 years. I do remember possible article or something I read or heard about, where somebody sued the Smithsonian to try to get some information. Did you really destroy this stuff? You would think that if there's all these humans, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add something on here. Let me see here. Let me do this. I'm going to add this. So this is supposedly the top, the giants on record, top 10 giant discovery in America. These things are anywhere from 6 foot tall, which is average human, to here's some 7-footers, all the way up to 18 foot was supposedly in West Hickory, Pennsylvania. And that was in an article I even looked it up, in 1870 from the Oil City Times. And with this 18-foot skeleton was a helmet and a 9-foot sword. I'm telling you what, if I want to get people in to pay $20 to come into my museum, I'd have that thing dead center right next to the T-Rex.
Did that newspaper article or newspaper itself really exist? I mean, I see that book that you have there. I read that book. It was largely a lot of clippings and that type of thing, right. Newspaper articles.
I have no idea. I just found it. But if you look here, here's the Serpent Mound in Ohio was number 10. Here's, the Miamisburg in Ohio. Here's the West History in Pennsylvania. Most of these up to about the number 6, these are just, I've seen these guys as, not this tall, but they're out there.
Yeah.
So once you get above about 8 foot tall, man, that's a tall dude.
Yeah. And of course, copper was a huge deal in, prehistoric times. And most of it came from, around Michigan, Lake Erie, in that area or whatever. So, it's pretty valuable trading, but it's pretty wild that guy had on. I mean, if he's that, how tall was he again? 16 feet?
He was
or
18 feet. He had a helmet and a 2.8 meter sword, which is about a 9-foot sword, was buried with him.
I mean, how do people not talk about this? I mean, if it's, legitimately historically been found and, it's been in legitimate newspapers that exist and they name, is this go back to, like I always talk about with Bigfoot, everybody's busy and everybody's living their life. And, you go on here a little while ago, I was doing some radio show in Toronto and the guys they don't know anything about Bigfoot. They just want to have a Bigfoot guy on there asking me the same questions that all the Bigfoot guys got asked 20 years ago. And we've already worked through and we already know the answers to them, but they're just busy and they're living their life and they're interested in whatever. And so much like Bigfoot, giant people aren't following what's being, historically brought up or come to light or whatever it happens to be because, they got kids they're trying to raise, they're doing their job, they're interested in the NFL and Chris Show, whatever it happens to be. You think that's the deal, Travis, that people are just not interested in it?
I think that's a big thing. And that's why I like to blast this stuff out, because people are doing their daily stuff. They're going to work, they're getting coffee, they're going, they're watching their favorite Netflix show, and they're not thinking about other things like this. Like, they don't know what the true history is. I mean, regardless if they're even into history, this is a pretty big deal, like, of our true history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
agree with that.
Do you think that there's a relationship between the giants and Bigfoot, or are there two separate type of things?
No, I do believe that there's probably a relationship between them. I'm sure I have a feeling that they are related. I'm still kind of looking into that personally.
I know there is researchers out there that believe that Bigfoot are Nephilim. That's not what I believe, but I know that there is people that believe that. Everybody, has to work through their own beliefs that way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I like to keep an open mind about that as well. So, like, who knows really? And there could be a possibility that there is a connection. I mean, it is odd that Bigfoot, is covered in hair. Some people say they look like an ape. Some people say they look like a man. I haven't ever had a face-to-face encounter, so I can't speak on that. But I've heard recordings and audio of, supposedly they had of a language or something like that. So yeah, that's a good question.
I know it's interesting. When you guys started talking initially, Brad had sent me stuff over the last couple of weeks from the Ukraine and whatnot. And when you start researching some of the giants and the Nephilim, you find out that region of the Ukraine has a large history of Nephilic activity, all the way back into biblical times. So there's some people that believe that it has more to do with that whole thing, and maybe that's a reason why, we would be over there, whatever, I don't know about that, but, I think it's interesting that there's a history there, and apparently some of the soldiers are seeing, some critters that are pretty large.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point.
So how many articles have you read about this? Or is it, let's say 10 articles, but they reference one sighting. So, they just got to fill papers, and so this one happens on the 1st, and then an article comes out 3 days later from a paper that's, the next town over. Then another article comes out 3 days later that's next town over, blah, blah, blah. So actual instances, how many instances do you think that you've actually researched and looked at?
Okay, so I try not to post doubles. You know what I mean? Like you're
Okay.
saying, I
Yeah.
try not duplicates. I try not to duplicate a story. Sometimes I'll bring one up. So I'm gonna guess over. It's got to be over 700 because on my page I'm at 1100 something. So just like a conservative guess, it's going to be like 700 or more.
Okay. So if we had 700 witnesses to a crime, we could probably get that guy convicted. Probably. Yeah. I would think so, right? That's the old Matt Moneymaker theory of Bigfoot, you know.
That seems to really be getting popular again now. I watched a show today, and that was one of the arguments everybody was making is that, you know, if you brought forth all the witnesses and the different forms of evidence, that people are convicted of a lot more or a lot less of crime than, you know, some of the things that we're talking about, whether it's Bigfoot or giants or whatever it happens to be.
So we're going to all agree that these things exist at some point in time, right?
Yeah, I'm there 100%.
Okay.
I mean, are you saying they still exist, or are you just saying
no, just they existed at some point in time?
Do you think they still exist?
Yeah.
I mean, you're the one sending me this stuff from
Afghanistan.
These soldiers, yeah.
Yeah, I do believe they still exist. I believe that, you know, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in this world. You know, there is video out there. There is things that happen. You know, all of this stuff cannot be made up. It can't be unreal. So it has to be truly, it has to be there.
So 100% chance that somewhere in the world there is something that's, you know, I'm going to say, what'd you say, like 8 foot? Once you get to 8 foot or whatever, you're like, that's pretty freaking big. So something 100% chance or something around the world that is not a man as we know it or whatever that's creeping around. Okay.
Travis?
Yeah, I mean, I lean that way too. I mean, I am kind of skeptical of that stuff, but I can't. I've heard too many stories, and I've heard what sounded to be credible witnesses that I can't not believe it for myself.
Okay.
I mean, Brad and I are getting reports, people reaching out to us all the time about this and that, and I talk to people every day. Have you had a witness contact you and say, I saw a giant?
As of yet, I haven't personally.
How about
Okay.
How about a skeleton?
No, and I'm surprised about that too. I had somebody ask me that the other day too. No, not yet. Not yet.
Okay.
So how does it happen that you get, like, you know, Brad likes Formula One, Brad's interested in Bigfoot, you know, I like Bigfoot, you know, I like roses, you know, we just all have different interests, but how did you get to giants? I mean, that's not very common. You know, if we Google people interested in giants, there wouldn't be that many across the world.
Right. Well, I was, you know, being in history, like I liked history, and I was studying the Celtic people. And as I studied them, you come across the head burial mounds, and I came across that there were some giants buried. And of course, you see the massive stones that they erected throughout the Western Europe area into the British Isles. And so that kind of led me into the giants. I was like, well, you know, I grew up in the church and I heard about David and Goliath. I was like, I never didn't not believe that. I always believed it to be true, just, you know, taking it just strictly faith, right? And so I was like, and then I came across other books, but, you know, they were just printed out, like typed out. I was like, man, you know what? I need to see this for myself. And so I started to do my own research. And that's when I started to come across, you know, multiple accounts. I was like, I really need to document this. And so that's how it started. Like, it's fascinating.
Have you got a chance to actually go see any of the giant or large skeletons that are around?
Where are they? I'd go see one.
No, I haven't.
Russ?
I mean, I've gone
no. I mean,
are you hiding some information here? What?
No. Yeah, I found one on a farm, and
Right.
I got it in a barn. I know that a lot of the mounds that were, I forget the exact number now, but I want to say around 60% of the mounds that they had found in the Ohio Valley when they were excavated, there was nothing there. You know, like the bones had deteriorated, and, you know, they're just maybe there were different levels of people. Maybe there were commoners that didn't have the copper or other types of ornament with them that we see in, like that one, Brad, that Chrysip mound or whatever, that's in Charleston that was on there. You know, I drive past that all the time. My dry cleaners is literally, I park in front of it to get it. At one point, there was actually a bar on top of that mound. Now there's not, but you know, at one point historically, like, I don't know, 100 years ago or something. But you know, I know when they excavated, there was like, you know, 7 or 8 skeletons that were like 7 feet tall or whatever it happens to be. And you know, it's pretty common here in the valley where we have the large river that goes out and hits the Ohio.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you were talking about Chillicothe, Ohio, a minute ago. I have a report here from 1897 from there. 10 skeletons were found in 2 mounds by Dr. Loveberry, the curator of the Ohio State University Museum.
Oh, wow.
One was that of a giant, fully 8 feet tall. It is the most notable find yet. And then that's the end of the article.
So I'm going to one-up you.
Okay.
And I'm going to pull one up here.
Sure.
November 16th, 1891. Mr. Warren Moorhead and Dr. Creason have opened the most interesting prehistoric relic yet discovered in America on a farm 7 miles west of Chillicothe. They exhumed a massive skeleton of a human encased in copper armor from a long mound. The mouth contained genuine pearls of large size, but were much damaged. At the side of the armored skeleton was another skeleton, supposed that of a woman. The discoverers think that they have found the king and queen of the mound builders. So,
yeah.
And that was in Chillicothe as well.
That was 7 miles west of Chillicothe. So that gives us 10 of your article, plus another 2 if they're not the same. And the serpent mound is down there. So in order to build one of these serpent mounds, you know, they didn't have wheelbarrows, and you know, it would take quite a bit of effort because they're very large. So if there was a tribe of giants, that they absolutely could have built that.
What about the you know, Brad, I was telling you about how there was this here in Charleston, 8 miles of stone wall, and the Indians knew that the people were there. They were dark colored people. They called them sun worshipers. And you know, what is it about that area? You know, that is where the Shawnee Indians had their largest encampment right there in the same area as that. Is there, I wonder if there's a you know, some type of historical account from the Indians about there being, you know, relating to those large people.
I have no idea. Travis is on here. He's the one that's, you know.
Have you heard anything? Have you ever done any research related to that, Travis? You know, like a lot of times the Bigfooters, we pay attention to Native American counts of Bigfoot and some of the behaviors that, you know, for instance, I was making an argument in one episode that we were doing about, while I was sure that Bigfoot may manipulate trees or that type of thing, or tree structures, that it was one thing that the Indians didn't talk about. And so that meant it less likely that it probably happened as much, because they talk about, you know, Bigfoot whistling and, you know, watch out for your women and children. And, you know, they throw stones, you know, and some of the other things. And so it seems like that we would have some historical accounts of the Indians dealing with the giants. Now, of course, I say that, and I'm thinking about the Loveland Cave situation in the Western United States, where the Indians were doing battled with the fair red-haired giant people, and apparently chased them all into a cave and lit a fire in front of it or something, and killed them off.
Right. That's the Paiute Indians. That's their tale. And they supposedly they still had, when she wrote that book, in their family like treasures, they still had like a like some of that hair from the giants, like that reddish. It was like an auburn red hair. So yeah, and then there are some accounts, but yeah, that I haven't talked. I would love to talk to some old Native Americans and just to see what has been passed down, but I haven't come across very much. Some articles I've come across, they will refer to Indian legend, like here was a giant we found, and it kind of lends the credence to this Indian legend that was around this area. And I'm kind of referring to like areas around Arizona, kind of like where the Anasazi Indians were from.
Yeah.
But
I remember
I have come across faint, murmurings of it.
I remember there was a red-haired tribe of fair-colored men that was in Kentucky that, there was some type of historical accounts. It's interesting that they seem to be commonly in areas where there's, caves. So I don't know whether, they historically use cave systems more because, you hear about in Russia, the troops were over there and there was a man that came rushing out of a cave and had like a loincloth on him, very primitive type clothing, kind of like a Neanderthal, and the troops shot him. And, he was using a cave. And of course, when we go back to, when we're finding all of our ancestors now, we're finding that, of course, they were using caves as opposed to the Indians were not doing that so much.
Yeah.
And of course, we don't have any evidence that Bigfoot was using caves either.
Right. Yeah, but giants have been, a lot of buried giants have been buried in caves. So that would kind of lend to the fact that maybe that they did live in them some. But no, there's a curse. There was here's a story of the Indians, the Shawnee Indians. There's a tale of the curse of yellow hair, and that's a race of giants on the Ohio River. And their chief was called Yellow Hair. They were like a light-skinned giant race, and the Shawnee Indians kind of fought them off. That's the Indian legend.
Okay. I mean, that might be the ones that were in Kentucky.
Yeah.
Because of course the Shawnee were where Brad's from, just south of there is where they most commonly were or whatever. In that whole thing, Tecumseh and,
Right.
Cornstalk here in West Virginia and parts of Kentucky and whatnot. So I have to ask you, like every single day when I am in the office, there'll be somebody who walks past me and asks me about Bigfoot or want to tell me something or whatever. It's an interesting thing to be interested in. So do people come and talk to you about it? And what is your dad? I know you work with your father. I mean, what does your family think about you being interested in giants and doing shows and podcasts and whatnot about giants?
I memean, honestly, I don't talk a lot about it because you kind of get a highbrow look, when you talk about this stuff. I'm sure it's much like Bigfoot. People ever raise eyebrows at you and act like you're crazy. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, so I try not to talk about it too much just because, people think you're odd, but like my immediate family, they're cool with it. I mean, it's not their take. I mean, it's not their taste of subject, so they don't really get into it too much, but
I remember one time I did a newspaper article and they were asking me something along the lines of what we were talking about. And I said that if everybody knew what I knew about Bigfoot, they would probably feel the same way that I did, but they just don't. And I'm sure that if people knew everything about giants that you knew, they'd probably be more open-minded to it as well.
Yeah, maybe so. I mean, I personally, years ago, I got ridiculed by a preacher about studying giants, which is kind of odd. And so, I don't know. I enjoy getting kind of in the background and just doing my research and blasting it out there, and kind of letting it speak for itself. Because I feel like the history is not being taught. I mean, obviously it's not being taught. So this is like a way that I can kind of just throw some historical articles out there. I mean, hey, it's just a newspaper, but you can look up the area. Like if it's somewhere in Kentucky, you can look up to your area. And that's why I try to hashtag the area. So if somebody is looking up hashtags, they may see it. I don't know. That's just kind of why I do it. And I feel better doing it that way. Yeah.
So I went back and I know that Russ had actually shared something with me and I couldn't remember where it was from. And it was actually from you. And it was a giant defensive hill fortification in Ross County that's Chillicothe once again, which was 140 acres. And this thing, you wrote that there's, the mound builders erect these massive temple and burial mounds, they also built huge defensive hill fortifications. Now, like I said, in order for a human that is back in the day, what are we talking? We're talking ancient Romans, the average height was 5'5". And, these people were in massive cities. That means they had agriculture, so they had food. They weren't just looking for sustenance every day, unlike, the North Koreans of today that are, average about 5'4", because there is just no food. So these people had plenty of sustenance, nutrition, better food than we have today, and they were still only 5.5 feet tall. So the Indians, the Incas, the Mayans, these people are still, not being racist by any way, shape, or form. You go to Mexico, I'm 6'2". I'm generally the tallest person in the grocery store. But for those people to build 140-acre fortified structures with walls, I just don't see it happening. I don't think they have a large enough population. Is that something that's found throughout quite a few places, in America, along where they found giant skeletons?
Yeah. And I'm going to try to start posting more on that. I've got a book, and you can pick this book up too. It's called Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley, and it's by Squire and Davis, and they worked for the Smithsonian. They don't report on giant skeleton sizes at all, but they do report on the mounds. What kind of mounds? There were some mounds they didn't know what they were for, but there were burial mounds, temple mounds, pyramid-shaped mounds, and all these hill forts. I think there's one. It may be the wrong spot. I think it's in Tennessee, maybe, but I may be wrong on that. Somewhere on the east, it's called Fort Ancient, and you may know of this. But it's another fort, pretty big fort, that is built by these peoples. And so I thought I might start posting more about that because, they were mound builders, but what else did they do? There's legends of them building canal systems down in like the bayous. I've got to rediscover that account. I've come across an account in the newspapers where it says that the mound builders and the giants built, like, the bayous might have come from that, because they are canals that connect riverways to each other. And that's just mind blowing that they might have been doing so much stuff like that.
Is that the genetic advantage of why you would be a giant? Is one, I guess, because, you could terrorize the little people, or that, it's just strictly a physical manifestation that you can get more done if you're larger and stronger. Because usually there's some, there's around the globe, people are modified, to be able to, just like animals, with Bergman's rule, the farther from the equator, the larger the animals. The deer in, Florida are smaller than the deer in Canada, and so forth and so on. People believe that Bigfoot's the same way. The tracks are commensurate with that, largely. At one time, they even did a study in the 80s that the tracks on average were larger the farther north than they were down south. So, I think that genetically, if something is a certain size, there's a reason for it to be a certain size. And so, I guess if you can answer that, maybe you can answer why there would be giants.
They're fallen angels. I thought we,
okay.
I thought we, they are what they are. That's my take.
So an angel has to be
I think they are
urged to be, because large intimidates.
Honestly, I don't know why they were large. I think they just were. Like, they weren't supposed to mate with the women, these angels, but when they did, something bad. Well, I don't know if it was bad, but something happened that wasn't supposed to happen, and they were just huge. I don't know how big were they. There's all kinds of debate on how big the first ones were.
Yeah.
But we do know that the Lord says they were as tall as cedar trees and as strong as oak trees. So, but I also believe that there were different tribes of giants, and maybe some of them were smaller than the other ones as they mixed in with other races of people as they traveled the earth.
Biblically, that's why Noah, why God flooded the earth, because he was trying to get rid of the defiled DNA.
Correct.
I know that I've told Brad that I have this theory that that's why we have, in many cases, evil in the world, and that the devil would try to be getting people together that had higher ratios or percentages of the Nephilic DNA, so that they were creating something that, or somebody that was more likely to do things that were more in line with what they had. But it's hard to know these things. I mean, it's fun to debate them.
Right. Yeah. That's a good thought.
Yeah. So anyway, we're getting down to the end. Do we have any last thoughts on this thing? We've determined that they did exist. We're talking 700 articles that you've independently researched and read, that people have written this stuff, and hopefully they just didn't write it because they had nothing better to do. It was actual facts. So we have determined that. We have determined, and anybody can do it, see it, whatever. Go to Newark, Ohio, and there's a large mound up there that they believe was built by giants. You go to the Serpent Mound, you go to mounds all over Ohio, the Midwest, and the Ohio Valley. There's the river, or the Ohio River Valley. So Mississippi River Valley, all that stuff, they're everywhere. So
that's what you're saying, because you've guaranteed 100% that they're still real.
I think
I'm just saying that until the 40s, we were still finding things, I mean, I don't know what that means prior to that, but I mean, there is reports still that, we're getting. I don't know that we have any reports from around the world of people seeing giants now, except for in the Ukraine area
or Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan. I'm sorry.
So
do we have reports of anywhere else in the world that they're reporting giants still to this day?
I've heard people say that in the Solomon Islands, they see them. That's all I know, though. I haven't researched that personally myself.
So
Okay.
we don't know if they're existing today. We'll throw that at a coin flip at this point in time.
Okay.
But we do know that the Smithsonian Institute, our federal government's natural history, whatever, they're supposed to have all the greatest things. They got Elvis's jacket or Fonz's jacket, Elvis's stuff. They've got the history of America. They had these things. They told people to quit calling them basically on them, and they took them and they destroyed them, or they lost them in their 1 million square foot warehouses, just like
You don't believe that, though.
Spielberg
You're
lost
confident that they're organized, whereas I'm not confident
just like the
government
Ark.
anyway.
Right?
Absolutely. They're unorganized, inept. They are horrible compared to anything the private sector does. There's nothing that our government does better than the private sector.
Okay.
And then I'm not confident in that. I'm confident that if they turn the three of us loose and we were able to go over there for a couple of years, that we would find something that of interest.
Okay. All right.
But the stickers fell off the box, so you don't know where it came from.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're organized.
We might need some help. We might need some manchaeologists that to come with us.
Right.
All right. So anyway,
Travis, thank you, man. Thanks for coming
Appreciate
on.
it.
Thanks for talking about it with us.
Oh man, I enjoyed it. It's always fun to talk about these subjects.
once again, the _
Yeah. And so once again, it's giants _of_ ancient America on Instagram and Facebook.
Okay. Giants _ Okay. All right.
Yep. You got it.
We'll
Hey, thanks for your time, my friend.
I'll put that on the
Oh, yeah.
in the description of this podcast. So hopefully if
Great.
people didn't hear it, they can look it up and they can get to your stuff. So all right, it was great.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
Appreciate you having on.
Okay,
All right,
the one
Russ.
thing now that is, I am shocked that you were willing to give the government the benefit of the doubt that they still had stuff. That is so un-Brad-like.
I think that they knew enough that they wanted to destroy it, so they had to know where it was at. So they did. They had a special book, and they knew where the stuff was at because they had guys there. So if you're talking from the 1800s to the 1940s, so you're talking 50, 60
You're talking about like
years.
Nicolas Cage's book and the National Treasure movie.
I don't know about that.
And each
Anyway.
president gets a book that
Right. Yeah.
says that Loch Ness is real and Bigfoot exists. And
Right. They supposedly in that I think that they're somebody. We'll have to have somebody on that knows about that at some point in time. So
we'll have to
Anyway.
black them out. We can't get them in trouble.
right, exactly. We'll just have to have their voice.
Yeah.
All right. That was fun.
Yeah.
Learned a
I
lot.
was, I wish that I knew more about the whole teeth thing, six finger thing, the Nephilic relationship to the giant thing. Whether, I'm not sure that we can ever know that, but I mean, I always find it interesting, like the time frame too. Like, there's people that only believe the Earth is like 5,000 years old. That might be fun. Somebody that would be fun to get on to find somebody that is, believes the stuff that like that. It's just hard to imagine all that stuff.
Well, I mean, you even think about too. So, if you follow Graham Hancock in the Young Dryas impact theory, so what is it, 12 to 11,500 to 12,600 years ago? A meteor hit the Earth. They've kind of proven this around that it destroyed a bunch of life all over the planet. Melted the ice caps, yada yada yada. So, if these things lived in caves, they could have survived that impact. And then did they build the mounds, and where did they go from there?
Well, if they're Nephilim, it wouldn't matter anyways, because
They weren't here until
they were here prior to the flood, and then the Bible says that after the flood they were there too.
okay. All right.
So
Anyway.
be interesting.
All right. Anyway,
Yeah.
something to think about. Do some search.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you get a chance, go to the Library of Congress, and you can search all the news articles and do your own research. So, all right.
Like,
outta here.
subscribe,
Yeah. Wide Open Research, Untold Radio,
thebigfootdoc.com.
Wide Open Research on Instagram, wideopenresearch@gmail.com. If you have any articles you want to contact us there, you can DM us on Wide Open Research on Instagram. Russ is on Twitter. I am not. All I did was get in arguments with people, so I stayed off of there.
I only
don't
talk
read the
about
comments
Bigfoot, though. I
anyway.
only post about Bigfoot.
Right. And I don't read the comments of anything because I generally do not care. There we go.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. We appreciate you for tolerating us another hour.
Yep. And we are out of here.